I never thought a dance lesson could make my heart betray me until she touched my hand. I never thought a dance studio could feel like a confession until the day I walked in and she was there. She stood by the bar, the late afternoon light catching the soft silver in her hair, and for a moment, the room fell away. I was 23, fumbling with my gym bag, trying not to seem like I didn't belong. And there she was, Lydia, my instructor, mid-40s, exuding this calm, effortless authority that made everything around her seem smaller, more manageable. She glanced up and hit me. She saw me. Not just looked, really saw. I froze, suddenly aware of every line on my shirt, the clumsy way I held my shoulders, the tight knot in my stomach. "Are you ready?" she asked, voice soft, steady, with just enough warmth to make me nervous. I nodded, though my hands trembled slightly. She smiled, the kind that doesn't need words to land somewhere deep inside you. And when she stepped closer to adjust my posture, I felt it, a quiet, electric pull. Her fingers barely touched my shoulder, but it left a trace, like heat lingering in a cold room. I wanted to apologize for my stiffness, for my fumbling steps, for whatever invisible boundary I was crossing just by being near her. "Relax," she whispered, guiding my hand to hers. "Let me lead." Her eyes held me in place longer than necessary. A subtle test I wasn't sure I passed. I wanted to laugh at how ridiculous I felt, how nervous a simple dance lesson had made me, but the sound caught somewhere in my throat. And I realized, with a mix of thrill and fear, that I was exactly where I wanted to be. We moved together, slowly at first, her body teaching mine what words never could. I noticed a faint scent of her perfume, a blend of jasmine and something warmer, comforting yet intoxicating, and the way her hand lingered on my back just slightly longer than necessary. Every correction, every gentle touch was layered with something unspoken, something I wasn't supposed to name out loud. The studio was quiet, except for the soft scrape of our shoes against the polished floor. Outside, the street hummed with the late afternoon traffic, but in here, time seemed to fold in on itself. I watched her watch me, caught in these tiny pauses, the subtle tilts of her head, the faint twitch of her lips when I finally got a step right. It wasn't just instruction. It was attention, and it made my chest ache. I wanted to tell her so many things. The way I'd been thinking about her since I signed up, the way my heart jumped when she touched my hand, the ridiculous hope that she might feel some fraction of the same pull. But the words stuck. I swallowed them down, let them roll around in my chest like coins I couldn't spend. And then, just as I was starting to think I might survive this lesson without revealing too much of myself, the silence broke. The doorbell rang. Sharp, sudden, entirely ordinary, but it cut through the room like a flare. Lydia stiffened for just a fraction of a second, her hand on my shoulder pausing midair. Her eyes flicked to the door, and in that glance, something unspoken passed between us, a mixture of alarm, hesitation, and anticipation. My stomach dropped, and I realized I was holding my breath, caught somewhere between what was happening and what could happen next. The moment hung, suspended, like the final note of a song you didn't want to end. And then she whispered, almost to herself, almost to me, "Stay, don't move." I watched her walk to the door, hesitating with her hand on the handle. Something in her pause made me realize she wasn't just thinking about whoever was ringing. It was the space between us, the tiny invisible line I wasn't supposed to cross. I wanted to step forward, but I stayed rooted, pretending to focus on the dance floor. Lydia grew up in a house where silence was louder than words. She told me once, during a casual chat about technique, that her first husband left quietly, leaving her with questions that never got answered. I remember the way her hands shook slightly when she talked about it, and how she covered it with a polite laugh. I thought about that now, about the wall she built, the careful way she let anyone in, and how terrifying it must be for her to stand here, so close to me. Me? My life had been a series of near misses and what-ifs. I'd chased degrees, jobs, fleeting friendships, but I'd never felt noticed, really seen, until Lydia. There was a longing inside me I didn't even understand fully. It wasn't just attraction. It was recognition, the sense that someone could look at me and quietly decide I mattered. And yet, it was dangerous. Age gap, the teacher-student boundary, the quiet rules I knew I might be breaking just by thinking these thoughts. She turned back from the door, and our eyes met. That flicker, that breathless pause was enough to make my chest tighten. I tried to look away, but her gaze held me. The room felt smaller somehow, tighter around us. My mind raced with the risks, scandal, misunderstanding, the possibility of ruining everything if I let this curiosity slip into something more. But my heart didn't care. We moved back to the center of the floor, resuming the lesson, but the energy had shifted. Every touch lingered just a second longer. Every correction came with a half smile that wasn't purely professional. I caught her watching me out of the corner of her eye, and I had to remind myself to breathe. The music played, soft, almost hesitant, and we moved together in silence, the rhythm of the dance masking the words we couldn't say. "Your posture, it's too tense," she said softly, adjusting my shoulders. But her fingers stayed just a moment longer than necessary, brushing against me in a way that sent heat crawling up my arms. My pulse jumped, and I needed to let my hands rest there, if only for a second. And for a fleeting moment, everything else fell away. The rules, the warnings, the age difference, the careful walls around her heart and mine. We were just two people, inches apart, holding on to something fragile and unspoken. Then she paused mid-step, letting her hand hover over mine. Our eyes met again, and I thought I saw a trace of hesitation, fear, maybe, or longing. She smiled faintly, almost shyly, as if acknowledging the tension we couldn't name. Without thinking, I reached out, brushing my fingers against hers. It was quick, tentative, but it lingered in the space between us. The kind of touch that spoke more than words ever could. And in that fleeting moment, I knew we both understood. Nothing had changed, yet everything had shifted. The next class started like any other, except it didn't. My chest felt tight before I even stepped into the studio, and I caught myself rehearsing words I would never say. Lydia was there, naturally, moving through the stretches with that effortless grace that made me both envious and dizzy. I tried to focus, but the memory of our fingers brushing yesterday lingered. Every glance she threw my way felt charged. Every adjustment of my posture weighted with more than just instruction. My hand shook slightly when I reached for her hand during a turn, and she hesitated too, her eyes flicking to mine, sharp with something unspoken. "Careful," she said, voice low, almost a warning. I wanted to laugh at my own nerves, but I didn't. There was something in her tone that made my stomach knot, like she knew the line we were circling and was terrified of crossing it. Then the door opened. Her assistant, Carla, came in, cheerful and oblivious. "Hey, Lydia, thought I'd drop by, and oh." Her eyes flicked between us, curiosity briefly softening into suspicion. My pulse jumped. I could feel Lydia stiffen, her hand lingering near mine a second too long before she stepped back. "Carla," Lydia said, calm but clipped, "I wasn't expecting you." Carla glanced at me, then back at Lydia, a half-smile playing at her lips. "Oh, you're new, right?" she said, and I nodded, feeling suddenly small under her gaze. I caught the faintest flicker in Lydia's eyes, a mixture of guilt and something else. My chest tightened. As Carla set down her bag, the music began again, and we had to start the routine over. But the tension didn't leave. Every step I took with her was heavier now, the risk of being caught alive in every subtle movement. And yet, the closeness, the way her hand rested near mine, the way our bodies aligned for a lift, was intoxicating. At one point, during a complicated turn, I misstepped. She steadied me, their faces inches apart. I could smell her hair, the faint trace of jasmine. I wanted to lean in, wanted to see if she would let me, but Carla's laughter from across the room pulled me back. My heart thumped painfully, and I realized how impossible it was to hide what I felt. Later, as we finished, Lydia brushed a strand of hair from my forehead, her fingers trembling slightly. I thought about reaching for her, telling her everything I couldn't say, but guilt and fear held me back. She looked at me then, her eyes dark with emotion, and I saw it. the same longing mirrored back. But the doorbell rang again, cutting through the quiet like a blade. This time it wasn't Carla, not anyone familiar. Lydia flinched, a flash of panic crossing her features. I wanted to ask what was wrong, wanted to step in, but we both froze. The music faded, leaving only the pulse of our breaths in the room. And then she whispered, just barely audible, "Not now, not yet." The words hung between us, a promise and a warning, and I realized the closer we came, the more dangerous it felt. And yet, I didn't want to pull away. The studio smelled faintly of polished wood and jasmine, the golden afternoon light cutting across the floor. I hadn't meant to come back today. Really, I hadn't. But something inside me, some desperate, irrational part, pulled me toward her, toward the quiet storm that seemed to follow her wherever she went. She was already there when I arrived, stretching by the bar, her hair pinned loosely, strands escaping to frame her face. I noticed immediately the way she tensed when someone else walked past the open studio door, a student leaving, a parent waiting outside, but relaxed when she saw me. That split-second relief, almost imperceptible, sent heat crawling up my neck. We started the routine, and I tried to focus. Really, I did. But every step, every brush of our hands, every accidental touch of her waist made my heart lurch. I could see in her eyes, too, the tightrope she was walking between professional control and something far more dangerous. And then I noticed him. Another student, tall, confident, younger than her usual crowd, leaning against the wall, laughing a little too easily. Lydia's gaze flickered toward him, a fraction of her attention diverted. My stomach twisted. Jealousy? Ridiculous. I shouldn't even feel it. But I did. A sharp, burning ache, right between my ribs. I tried to swallow it down, try to focus on the lesson, but my mind replayed every time her fingers lingered on me, every fleeting smile she'd given me. The student made a joke. She laughed. And I realized my chest had tightened, my hands clenching at my sides. I wanted to storm out, to leave, to do anything to get the image out of my mind, but I also couldn't. I couldn't move. She noticed. I saw it in the way her eyes softened, and then, in a flash of panic, she took a step toward me, cutting across the floor. "It's nothing," she said, her voice low, almost pleading. But there was something there, something unspoken, a line of tension drawn and redrawn between us. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The words faltered. I wanted to tell her everything, the way my thoughts spun, how impossible it was to stop thinking about her, how wrong and right it all fell at once. But I couldn't. I only stepped closer, feeling the space between us shrink. She hesitated, and for a heartbeat, the entire studio seemed to pause. Her hand lifted slightly, almost touching mine, then froze mid-air. The unspoken question hung between us. Do we dare? I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down, the risk, the thrill, the impossible pull of it all. I wanted to close the distance, to bridge the gap with everything I couldn't say. But a sliver of doubt, of fear, whispered through me. If I moved too fast, if I acted on this, it could all collapse. And then she stepped back just a fraction, her gaze holding mine, intense, vulnerable, trembling. I wanted to reach for her, to close the space completely, but the room was suddenly too loud, too real, and the next beat of our story hung suspended. The moment hadn't broken yet, but it felt like it could shatter at any second. I thought I had a handle on the tension between us, thought I understood the unspoken rules. Until that evening, when I stayed late at the studio to practice alone, and the quiet was shattered. Lydia was already there, moving gracefully through stretches I could barely keep up with. The golden light from the street lamps spilled across the floor, soft and intimate. I hesitated at the door, heart hammering. She looked up and smiled, a smile that always made my chest ache, but then her gaze flicked past me. A message popped up on her phone, and she froze. I didn't recognize the number, but the words were clear enough when I glimpsed. I saw him at the cafe today. Who's she with? Don't lie. Her fingers tightened around the phone, knuckles white. And then, almost involuntarily, she whispered, "It's not what you think." But the words were meant for herself, not me. My mind raced. Someone was watching her, or maybe me. Someone new. And the fragile bubble we'd built around ourselves, the careful dance we'd been performing, cracked in an instant. "Ooh, who is it?" I asked, voice catching. She shook her head, a tremor in her jaw. "It doesn't matter." But it did. Everything mattered now. Her eyes darted to the door, as if expecting someone to step through, and I realized how dangerous this was, how vulnerable she had made herself without realizing it, how quickly everything could unravel. I wanted to reach out, to tell her it didn't matter, that we could ignore it, but then I saw the hesitation in her body, the way she pulled back slightly, like she was bracing for a blow. She wasn't just afraid for herself. She was afraid for me, for us. The revelation hung between us like a storm cloud. I could feel my chest tightening, my stomach twisting. This wasn't just jealousy or desire anymore. This was risk, real risk. And yet, in the midst of it, my pulse thrummed with something I couldn't name, something reckless and alive. "I don't want to lie," I said softly. "I don't want to pretend this isn't happening." She swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "I shouldn't even be here. You don't know what's at stake." "Then tell me," I said. "I can handle it. I can." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She took a deep breath, trembling slightly. "Someone from my past. He knows about me. About us. Us." The word echoed in my mind, heavy and impossible. My throat went dry. All the careful control, all the boundaries we'd been maintaining, felt suddenly laughable. And yet, despite the danger, despite the fear, my hand itched to reach for hers. She looked at me, then, full of vulnerability, guilt, and a spark of something I'd been craving since the first day. "I can't let this ruin you," she whispered. I shook my head. "Nothing could ruin me. Not if you're here." For a heartbeat, the tension shifted into something almost tender, but the knowledge of what could come, the shadow waiting outside our fragile world, lingered. The music of our hearts played louder than the silence, and for the first time, I realized this wasn't just a dance. This was a choice, and the stakes had never been higher. And then her phone buzzed again, and I knew. We had seconds before the storm truly hit. The studio was quiet, but my chest felt like it would burst. Lydia's phone lay on the floor, forgotten, and for a moment, nothing existed outside this room, this space, this fragile, trembling closeness between us. She stood a few feet away, arms wrapped loosely around herself, eyes downcast. I could see the weight of guilt and fear pressing into her shoulders, and I needed, to bridge the gap, to take the risk for both of us. "I don't care who's watching," I said, voice low. "I don't care about the past or the rules or what could happen. I want you." Her head snapped up, eyes wide, shimmering with a mixture of relief and terror. "You don't understand. This isn't safe. Not for either of us." "I do," I said. "I know exactly what it is. And I'm still here." She laughed, a broken, shaky sound, and it tore at something deep inside me. "You don't know what it feels like to carry this, to have made choices that could ruin everything." "I don't know," I admitted, "but I know what it feels like to be here, with you, and pretend I can walk away. I can't." Her lips parted, and I thought I saw her falter, her walls trembling. I took a cautious step forward, and she didn't move back, not entirely. Her hands were trembling, but they didn't reach for mine. "I've spent years building walls," she said, voice barely a whisper. "And I don't want walls," I interrupted gently. "I don't want distance. I want this," I said, letting my hand hover near hers, letting my fingers brush against hers softly. The touch was electric and tentative, but she didn't pull away. Time seemed to stretch, the golden light pooling around her, the polished floor reflecting the tremor in her movements. She bit her lip, swallowed hard, and then let her fingers entwine with mine. Just that, just a simple connection, felt like the first honest thing we'd shared. "I've been afraid," she admitted, voice quivering. "Afraid of ruining you, of crossing a line I can't come back from." "You can't ruin me," I said. "Not when all I want is to be here, with you, whatever comes." She exhaled, a shaky laugh breaking through the tension. "You make it sound so simple." "It doesn't have to be simple," I said. "It just has to be real." Her eyes met mine fully, unguarded for the first time, and in that instant, I understood everything I'd been feeling, everything she had been hiding. There was fear, yes, and there was risk, but there was also trust and recognition, and a fragile kind of hope neither of us dared to name aloud until this exact moment. We didn't kiss, not yet, but our hands stayed clasped, our bodies close enough to feel the warmth radiating between us. The world outside the studio could wait. For now, there was this honesty, vulnerability, and a choice to step forward together. And though the future was uncertain, I realized something that didn't need words. We had both chosen. The studio was quiet, but it no longer felt tense. The golden light from the late afternoon had softened into a warm amber, spilling across the polished floor like a promise. Lydia and I stood there, hands still lightly intertwined, neither speaking, both feeling the weight of what had just happened. The fear was still there, of course. The rules we had risked, the whispers of judgment outside these walls, but for the first time, it didn't matter. Not in this moment. She looked at me, her eyes steady, and I could see the relief behind the vulnerability. Relief that I hadn't walked away. Relief that, somehow, we had survived the storm. "I can't promise it'll be easy," she said softly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her fingers trembled slightly, a quiet echo of the tension we had carried for weeks. "I don't need easy," I replied. "I just need this us." She smiled, a small, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes and made my chest ache in the best possible way. "Then let's try," she whispered. And that was enough. The unspoken understanding between us, messy, fragile, exhilarating, felt more profound than any perfect moment I could have imagined. We moved to the center of the floor, and for the first time, our dance wasn't just about steps, turns, or instruction. It was about balance, about trust, about letting go of the fear and surrendering to something real. Every movement, every brush of our hands was a confirmation we were choosing this together. I caught her glance, and in it I saw laughter, warmth, and something deeper, the kind of recognition that comes from knowing someone completely and still wanting to stay. The past, with all its mistakes and near misses, felt like a distant echo. Here, in this small studio with the amber light and soft music, there was only us. Later, as we left the building, the cool evening air hit my face, and she slipped her hand into mine without hesitation. The city moved around us, unaware of the fragile story we had written in the quiet of that studio. We walked slowly, savoring the closeness, the unspoken promises, the sense that nothing had to be perfect to be enough. "I guess this is just the beginning," she said, a playful tremor in her voice. I laughed, heart light, though still beating with the rush of everything we had risked. "I'm okay with beginnings," I said, "especially ones with you." And as we disappeared into the evening, hand in hand, I realized that love, messy, complicated, human, wasn't about certainty. It was about courage, about choosing over and over to step forward, even when the world outside whispers that you shouldn't. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? If you want more slow burn, emotional romance like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for new stories that make your heart race.